Hello, and welcome back to Let's Play The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, Game of the Year Edition. It is story time once again. So let's head inside, because don't want to be a weirdo reading books in the rain.
Yes.
Okay. We'll start with what Fedar is carrying around. Let's see. This looks good. Ancestors and the Dunmer. Ghosts walk among them. The departed spirits of the Dunmeri, and perhaps those of all races, persist after death. The knowledge and power of departed ancestors benefits the bloodlines of Dunmeri houses. The bond between the living family members and immortal ancestors is partly blood, partly ritual, partly volitional. A member brought into the house through marriage binds himself through ritual and oath into the clan, and gains communication and benefits from the clan's ancestors. However, his access to the ancestors is less than his offspring, and he retains some access to the ancestors of his own bloodline. The family shrine. Each residence has a family shrine. In poorer homes, it may be no more than a hearth or alcove where family relics are displayed and venerated. In wealthy homes, a room is set aside for the use of the ancestors. This shrine is called the Waiting Door and represents the door to oblivion. Here, the family members pay their respects to their ancestors through sacrifice and prayer, through oaths sworn upon duties, and through reports on the affairs of the family. In return, the family may receive information, training, and blessings from the family's ancestors. The ancestors are thus the protectors of the home, and especially the precincts of the Waiting Door. The Ghost Fence. It is a family's most solemn duty to make sure their ancestors' remains are interred properly in a city of the dead, such as Necrom. Here the spirits draw comfort from one another against the chill of the mortal world. However, as a sign of great honor and sacrifice, an ancestor may grant that part of his remains be retained to serve as part of a ghost fence protecting the clan's shrine and family precincts. Such an arrangement is often part of the family member's will, that a knucklebone shall be saved out of his remains and incorporated with solemn magic and ceremony into a clan ghost fence. In more exceptional cases, an entire skeleton or even a preserved corpse may be bound into a ghost fence. These remains become a beacon and focus for ancestral spirits, and for the spirit of the remains in particular. The more remains used to make a ghost fence, the more powerful the fence is, and the most powerful mortals in life have the most powerful remains. The great ghost fence created by the tribunal to hold back the blight incorporates the bones of many heroes of the temple and of the houses Indoril and Redoran, who dedicated their spirits to the temple and clan as their surrogate families. The ghost fence also contains bones taken from the catacombs of Necrom and the many battlefields of Morrowind. The Mortal Chill. Spirits do not like to visit the mortal world, and they do so only out of duty and obligation. Spirits tell us that the other world is more pleasant, or at least more comfortable for spirits, than our real world, which is cold, bitter, and full of pain and loss. Mad Spirits. Spirits that are forced to remain in our world against their will may become mad spirits, or ghosts. Some spirits are bound to this world because of some terrible circumstances of their death, or because of some powerful emotional bond to a person, place, or thing. These are called hauntings. Some spirits are captured and bound to enchanted items by wizards. If the binding is involuntary, the spirit usually goes mad. A willing spirit may or may not retain its sanity, depending on the strength of the spirit and the wisdom of the enchanter. Some spirits are bound against their wills to protect family shrines. This unpleasant fate is reserved for those who have not served the family faithfully in life. Dutiful and honorable ancestral spirits often aid in the capture and binding of wayward spirits. These spirits usually go mad and make terrifying guardians. They are ritually prevented from harming mortals of their clans, but that does not necessarily discourage them from mischievous or peevish behavior. They are exceedingly dangerous for intruders. At the same time, if an intruder can penetrate the spirit's madness and play upon the spirit's resentment of his own clan, the angry spirits may be manipulated. Oblivion. The existence of Oblivion is acknowledged by all Tamriel cultures, but there is little agreement on the nature of that other world, other than it is the place where the Aedra and Daedra live, and that communication and travel are possible between this world and Oblivion through magic and ritual. The Dunmer do not emphasize the distinction between this world and Oblivion, as do the human cultures of Tamriel. They regard our world and the other world as a whole with many paths from one end to the other, rather than two separate worlds of different natures with distinct borders. This philosophical viewpoint may account for the greater affinity of elves for magic and its practices. Foreign views of Dunmer ancestor worship and spirit magic. The Altmer and Bosmer cultures also venerate their ancestors, but only by respecting the orderly and blissful passage of these spirits from this world to the next. That is, Wood Elves and High Elves believe it is cruel and unnatural to encourage the spirits of the dead to linger in our world. Even more grotesque and repugnant is the display of the bodily remains of ancestors in ghost fences and ash pits. The presentation of finger bones in a family shrine, for example, is sacrilegious to the Bosmer, who eat their dead, and barbaric to the Altmer, who inter their dead. The human cultures of Tamriel are ignorant and fearful of dark elves and their culture, considering them to be inhuman and evil, like orcs and Argonians, but more sophisticated. The human populations of Tamriel associate Dunmer ancestor worship and spirit magic with necromancy. In fact, this association of the Dark Elves with necromancy is at least partly responsible for the dark reputation of Dunmer throughout Tamriel. This is generally an ignorant misconception, for necromancy outside the acceptable clan rituals is a most abhorrent abomination in the eyes of the Dunmer. The Dark Elves would never think of practicing sorcerous necromancy upon any Dark Elf or upon the remains of any elf. However, Dark Elves consider the human and orcish races to be little more than animals. There is no injunction against necromancy upon such remains, or on the remains of any animal, bird, or insect. Imperial policy officially recognizes the practices of Dunmer ancestor veneration and spirit magic as a religion, and protects their freedom to pursue such practices so long as they do not threaten the security of the Empire. Privately, most imperial officials and traders believe Dark Elf ancestor worship and displays of remains are barbaric or even necromantic. Telvanni necromancy. The Telvanni are adept masters of necromancy. They do not, however, practice necromancy upon the remains of Dark Elves. Sane Telvanni regard such practices with loathing and righteous anger. They do practice necromancy upon the remains of animals and upon the remains of humans, orcs, and Argonians, who are technically no more than animals in Morrowind. Publisher's note: this book was written by an unknown scholar as a guide for foreign visitors to Morrowind shortly after the armistice was signed. Many of these practices have since fallen into disfavor. The most obvious changes are those regarding the practice of necromancy and the Great Ghost Fence. Dunmer today regard necromancy upon any of the accepted races as an abomination. The Ghost Fence has forced many changes in the practice of ancestor worship. With the vast majority of ancestors' remains going to strengthen the Great Ghost Fence around the mountain of Dagoth-Ur, there are very few clan ghost fences in Morrowind. The temple discourages such practices among the houses as selfish. The upkeep of family tombs and private waiting doors has also fallen into disfavor, as very few remains have been buried in these tombs and shrines since the armistice. In recent years, most Dunmer venerate a small portion of their ancestors' remains kept at a local temple. Very informative. Next we have The Book of Dawn and Dusk. The Book of Dawn and Dusk is a collection of sayings and aphorisms attributed variously to the tribunals and to their saints and servants. Many of these sayings have become common clichés of everyday life in Morrowind. The following selection of slogans will illustrate many of the simplest notions of the tribunal faithful. Speak none but good of the gods. We can have no opinions about truth. Rumors flow from the house of troubles. Count only the happy hours. No child has a sinner's heart. Let faith be your only law. Fear of the fool is the beginning of wisdom. Almsivy in every hour. Walk always in the presence of your lords. Comfort is given, justice is taken. Learn by serving. From the heart, the light. From the head, the law. Blessed Almsivy, mercy, mastery, mystery. Forge a keen faith in the crucible of suffering. Engrave upon thy eye the image of injustice. Death does not diminish, the ghost gilds with glory. Faith conquers all, let us yield to faith. Better to suffer a wrong than to do one. The heavens are in their glory, applaud. Folly secures its power to harm. Though forbidden to some, not to you. Oh, how rarely wisdom rules our hearts. Blessed are we who serve Almsivy. 3 mouths sing mercy, mastery, mystery. Gather no seed in the fields of hell. The thrice-sealed house withstands the storm. By breath and blood protect us all. Can ghosts or justice change with time? Consider your end, mortal. Accept grace without limits. Enter the rhapsody of the God Poet. Kneel before the teacher's chair. 3 hands, 3 hearts, 3 eyes. Keep no secret from your judge's scale. Forge darkness into light. Refuse neither brother nor ghost. Blessed Almsivi through birth, life, ghost. From glowing ashes the poet's wrath shall shine. If Vivec is for us, who can stand against us? Fate, monstrous and empty, the whirling wheel of evil. How black my heart, roasting fiercely. And lastly, the 36 Lessons of Vivec, Sermon 16. The Hortator wandered through the morning hold, wrestling with the lessons he had learned. They were slippery in his mind. He could not always keep the words straight, and knew that this was a danger. He wandered to find Vivec, his lord and master, the glory of the image of Veloth, and found him, of all places, in the Temple of False Thinking. There, clockwork shears were taking off Vivec's hair. A beggar king had brought his loom and was making of the hair an incomplete map of adulthood and death. Nerevar said, "Why are you doing this, my lord?" Vivec said, "To make room for the fire." And the Hortator could see that Vivec was out of sorts, though not because of the impending new power to come. The Golden Warrior poet had been exercising his water face as well, learned from the dregs before he was born. Nerevar said, "Is this to keep you from the fire?" Vivec said, "It is so that I may see with truth. It, and my place here at the altar of Padme in the House of False Thinking, serves so that I may see beyond my own secrets. The water face cannot lie. It comes from the ocean, which is too busy to think, much less lie. Moving water resembles truth by its trembling." Nerevar said, "I am afraid to become slipshod in my thinking." Vivec said, "Reach heaven by violence, then." So, to quiet his mind, the Hortator chose from the fight racks an axe. He named it and moved on to the first moon. There, Nerevar was greeted by the Parliament of Craters, who knew him by title and resented his presence, for he was to be a ruling king of Earth, and this was the lunar realm. They shifted around him in a pattern of entrapment. "The moon does not recognize crowns or scepters," they said, "nor the representatives of kingdoms below, lion or serpent or mathematician. We are the graves of those that have migrated and become ancient countries. We seek no queens or thrones. Your appearance is decidedly solar, which is to say a library of stolen ideas. We are neither tear nor sorrow. Our revolution succeeded in the manner that it was written. You are the Hortator, and unwelcome here." And so Nerevar carved at the grave ghosts until he was out of breath, and their parliament could make no new laws. He said, "I am not of the slaves that perish." Of the members of parliament, only a few survived the Hortator's attack. A surviving crater said, "Appropriation is nothing new. Everything happens of itself. This motif is by no means unassociated with hero myths. You have not acted with the creative impulse. You fall below the weight of destiny. We are graves, but not coffins. Know the difference. You have only dug more and supplied no ghosts to reside within. Central to your claim is the predominance of frail events. To be judged by the earth is to sit on a throne of wonder why. Damage us more, and you will find naught but the absence of our dead." The ending of the words is Almsivi. Of course, yes. And the rest of the reading is all over here. We'll start with... Well, can't quite seem to reach it. There it is. Special Flora of Tamriel by Hardin the Herbalist. The poppy, in both black and white varieties, may be found growing wild in the mountains of Hammerfell. Their succulent pods are often the only nourishment for adventurers who find themselves in the wilderness without rations. It is said that black and white poppies imbibed together have magical properties. When they are crushed and mixed with the milk of the agile-footed mountain goat, the resulting potion allows the user to glide safely above ground. Fire fern, a perennial herb, is native to the province of Morrowind. The flowers are inconspicuous and often hidden. The glossy, evergreen foliage and blossoms are resistant to conditions of high heat and bright light. A petal from this plant placed under the adventurer's tongue will provide protection from the heat and fire of the lava pits and thermal streams around GotY. Dragon's tongue, a common name for a fern-like herb found in Black Marsh, is especially prolific around the area of the Ulthuris swamp. It is a beautiful wildflower whose name comes from the fire-red fronds that protect its golden effervescence. As pretty as it is, however, it is a deadly poison to most living beings and needs to be avoided by adventurers, especially unprotected ones, as it is lethal to the touch. It is said, however, that Argonians can handle the plant and use the sap derived from its roots to enhance their endurance. Dolmica redwort is an herb grown by many residents of Valenwood for their beautiful and showy flowers. They attain a height of about 3 feet and sport feathery leaves. The flowers are usually bright red. In addition to their beauty, they are said to have the magical ability of enhancing the appearance of anyone who carries or wears one of the blooms. Ironwood nut is a hard-shelled fruit that comes from the ironwood trees growing deep in the forests of Skyrim. The wood of these trees is hard as the metal after which it is named. The very rare black variety of ironwood is said to produce a nut which is very succulent and believed to greaten the strength of the adventurer who is able to crack its shell and partake of it. The ginkgo leaves, which are found along the banks of rivers and lakes in Hammerfell, are most inconspicuous, only their peculiar half-moon shape making them noticeable. The edible foliage is very sweet and quite tasty. Legend has it that when mixed properly with the pulp of the aloe plant, the resulting concoction has the ability of increasing one's stamina for a short while. The Somnolius fern can be found in the swamps of Black Marsh. The fronds of this plant are light green and quite delicate. Picking a frond can be very difficult, as they usually crumble to the touch, but once retrieved it can be used to put an enemy to sleep for a short while by passing it under his nose. Arrowroot is a thick, rubbery tuber that can be found in the province of Valenwood. The plant is quite difficult to find, as its above-ground foliage is very meager and scrawny. But the root itself can be most beneficial to the gatherer, as it has magical properties. The paste made from grinding the root is quite wholesome and can improve the user's accuracy with a bow and arrow or other missile weapon. Nightshade is reputed to be a very poisonous herb. However, the variety found in many parts of Elsewhere is cherished by Khajiits who have taken up careers in thievery. Many Khajiits will tuck a piece of nightshade inside their armor to increase their abilities to skulk, hide, and become invisible. Let's proceed over here.
All right, I'm listening.
Good, because I'm reading. Frontier, Conquest, and Accommodation, A Social History of Cyrodiil, University of Gwilym Press, 3rd Era, 344. Historians often portray the human settlement of Tamriel as a straightforward process of military expansion of the Nords of Skyrim. In fact, human settlers occupied nearly every corner of Tamriel before Skyrim was even founded. These so-called Nedic peoples include the Proto-Cyrodiilians, the ancestors of the Bretons, the Aboriginals of Hammerfell, and perhaps a now-vanished human population of Morrowind. Strictly speaking, the Nords are simply another of these Nedic peoples, the only one that failed to find a method of peaceful accommodation with the elves who already occupied Tamriel. Ysgramor was certainly not the first human settler in Tamriel. In fact, in fleeing civil war in Atmora, as the Song of Return states, Ysgramor was following a long tradition of migration from Atmora. Tamriel had served as a safety valve for Atmora for centuries before Ysgramor's arrival. Malcontents, dissidents, rebels, landless younger sons all made the difficult crossing from Atmora to the New World of Tamriel. New archaeological excavations date the earliest human settlements in Hammerfell, High Rock, and Cyrodiil at Merithic era 800 to 1000, centuries earlier than Ysgramor, even assuming that the 12 Nord kings prior to Harald were actual historical figures. The Nedic peoples were a minority in a land of elves and had no choice but to live peacefully with the Elder race. In High Rock, Hammerfell, Cyrodiil, and possibly Morrowind, they did just that, and the Nedic peoples flourished and expanded over the last centuries of the Merithic era. Only in Skyrim did this accommodation break down, an event recorded in the Song of Return. Perhaps being close to reinforcements from Atmora, the Proto-Nords did not feel it necessary to submit to the authority of the Skyrim elves. Indeed, the early Nord chronicles note that under King Harald, the first historical Nord ruler, 1st era 113 to 221, the Atmoran mercenaries returned to their homeland following the consolidation of Skyrim as a centralized kingdom. Whatever the case, the pattern was set. In Skyrim, expansion would proceed militarily, with human settlement following the frontier of Conquest, and the line between human territory and elven territory was relatively clear. But beyond this zone of conflict, the other Nedic peoples continued to merge with their elven neighbors. When the Nord armies of the First Empire finally entered High Rock and Cyrodiil, they found Bretons and Proto-Cyrodiils already living there among the elves. Indeed, the Nords found it difficult to distinguish between Elf and Breton. The two races had already intermingled to such a degree. The arrival of the Nord armies upset the balance of power between the Nedic peoples and the elves. Although the Nords' expansion into High Rock and Cyrodiil was relatively brief, less than 2 centuries, the result was decisive. From then on, power in those regions shifted from the elves to the humans. And now we shall read Aedra and Daedra. The designations of gods, demons, Aedra, and Daedra are universally confusing to the layman. They are often used interchangeably. Aedra and Daedra are not relative terms. They are elvish and exact. Azura is a Daedra both in Skyrim and Morrowind. Aedra is usually translated as ancestor, which is as close as Cyrodiilic can come to this elven concept. Daedra means roughly not our ancestors. This distinction was crucial to the Dunmer, whose fundamental split in ideology is represented in their mythical genealogy. Aedra are associated with stasis. Daedra represent change. Aedra created the mortal world and are bound to the earthbones. Daedra, who cannot create, have the power to change. As part of the divine contract of creation, the Aedra can be killed. Witness Lorcan and the Moons. The Protean Daedra, for whom the rules do not apply, can only be banished. And now, the Anticipations. The Daedra are powerful ancestor spirits, similar in form and substance to the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, but weaker in power and more arbitrary and removed from the affairs of mortals. In old times, the Chimer worshipped the Daedra as gods, but they did not deserve this veneration, for the Daedra harm their worshippers as often as help them. The advent of the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, changed this unhappy state. By the apotheosis, the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, became the protectors and high ancestor spirits of the Dunmer, and bade the Daedra to give proper veneration and obedience. The 3 good Daedra, Boethia, Azura, and Mephala, recognized the divinity of the triune ancestors, blessed be their holy names. The rebel Daedra, Molag Bal, Malakath, Sheogorath, and Mehrunes Dagon, refused to swear fealty to the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, and their worshippers were cast out. These rebel Daedra thus became the 4 corners of the House of Troubles, and they continue to plague our tranquility and tempt the unwary into heresy and dark worship. The priests of the temple remain ever vigilant for signs of the adversary's return, sometimes aided by the loyal 3 good Daedra, who are familiar with the wiles of their rebellious kin. The good Daedra are known to the temple as the Anticipations, since they are the early ancestral anticipations of the loving patronage of the Tribunal. The Anticipations are the Daedra lords Boethia, Mephala, and Azura. Boethia is the anticipation of Almalexia, but male to her female. Boethia was the ancestor who illuminated the elves ages ago, before the Mythic era. He told them the truth of Lorcan's test, and defeated Oriel's champion, Trinimac. Boethia ate Trinimac and voided him. The followers of Boethia and Trinimac rubbed the soil of Trinimac upon themselves and changed their skins. Mephala is the anticipation of Vivec, but manifold and androgynous. Mephala taught the Chimer to evade their enemies or kill them with secret murder. The Chimer were few in those days and threatened on all sides. Mephala taught the Chimer to build houses. Later, Mephala created the Morag Tong. Azura is the anticipation of Safa Sil, but female to his male. Azura was the ancestor who taught the Chimer how to be different from the Altmer. Her teachings are sometimes attributed to Boethia. In the stories, Azura is often encountered more as a communal progenitor of the race as a whole rather than as an individual ancestor. She is associated with dusk and dawn and is sometimes called the Mother Soul. Azura's star, also called the Twilight Star, appears briefly at dawn and dusk low on the horizon below the constellation of the Steed. Azura is associated with mystery and magic, fate and prophecy. And lastly, the Anuad Paraphrased. The first ones were brothers. Anu and Padme. They came into the void, and time began. As Anu and Padme wandered the void, the interplay of light and darkness created Nur. Both Anu and Padme were amazed and delighted with her appearance, but she loved Anu, and Padme retreated from them in bitterness. Nur became pregnant, but before she gave birth, Padme returned, professing his love for Nur. She told him that she loved only Anu, and Padme beat her in rage. Anu returned, fought Padme, and cast him outside time. Nur gave birth to creation, but died from her injuries soon after. Anu, grieving, hid himself in the sun and slept. Meanwhile, life sprang up on the 12 worlds of creation and flourished. After many ages, Padme was able to return to time. He saw creation and hated it. He swung his sword, shattering the 12 worlds in their alignment. Anu awoke and fought Padme again. The long and furious battle ended with Anu the victor. He cast aside the body of his brother, who he believed was dead, and attempted to save creation by forming the remnants of the 12 worlds into one, Nirn, the world of Tamriel. As he was doing so, Padme struck him through the chest with one last blow. Anu grappled with his brother and pulled them both outside of time forever. The blood of Padme became the Daedra. The blood of Anu became the stars. The mingled blood of both became the Aedra, hence their capacity for good and evil, and their greater affinity for earthly affairs than the Daedra, who have no connection to creation. On the world of Nirn, all was chaos. The only survivors of the 12 worlds of creation were the Elnafey and the Hist. The Elnafey are the ancestors of Mer and Men. The Hist are the trees of Argonia. Nirn originally was all land, with interspersed seas, but no oceans. A large fragment of the Elnafey world landed on Nirn relatively intact, and the Elnafey living there were the ancestors of the Mer. These Elnafey fortified their borders from the chaos outside, hid their pocket of calm, and attempted to live on as before. Other Elnafey arrived on Nirn scattered amid the confused jumble of the shattered worlds, wandering and finding each other over the years. Eventually, the wandering Elnafey found the hidden land of the old Elnafey and were amazed and joyful to find their kin living amid the splendor of ages past. The wandering Elnafey expected to be welcomed into the peaceful realm, but the old Elnafey looked on them as degenerates, fallen from their former glory. For whatever reason, war broke out and raged across the whole of Nirn. The old Elnafey retained their ancient power and knowledge, but the Wanderers were more numerous and toughened by their long struggle to survive on Nirn. This war reshaped the face of Nirn, sinking much of the land beneath new oceans and leaving the lands as we know them: Tamriel, Akavir, Atmora, and Yokuda. The old Elnafey realm, although ruined, became Tamriel. The remnants of the Wanderers were left divided on the other 3 continents. Over many years, the Elnafey of Tamriel became the Mer, elves; the Dwemer, the Deep Ones, sometimes called dwarves; the Chimer, the Changed Ones, who later became the Dunmer; the Dunmer, the Dark or Cursed Ones, the Dark Elves; the Bosmer, the Green or Forest Ones, the Wood Elves; the Altmer, the Elder or High Ones, the High Elves. On the other continents, the wandering Elnafey became the Men, the Nords of Atmora, the Redguards of Yokuda, and the Saesi of Akavir. The Hist were bystanders in the Elnafey War, but most of their realm was destroyed as the war passed over it. A small corner of it survived to become Black Marsh in Tamriel, but most of their realm was sunk beneath the sea. Eventually, men returned to Tamriel. The Nords were the first, colonizing the northern coast of Tamriel before recorded history, led by the legendary Isgramor. The 13th of his line, King Harald, was the first to appear in written history, and so the mythic era ended. Okay, well, let's head back to where we were at the beginning of the video.
Speak freely, friend. Yes.
And that concludes this episode of Storytime with Fedar Moc. We just read Ancestors and the Dunmer, the Book of Dawn and Dusk, the 36 Lessons of Vivec, Sermon 16, Special Flora of Tamriel, Frontier, Conquest, and Accommodation, A Social History of Cyrodiil, Aedra and Daedra, The Anticipations, and the Anuad Paraphrased. Fedar will finally be making his way to Balmora, it's just down the road here, in the next video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.